Hello and welcome to another episode of Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast that hooks and pokes in the different areas of audiovisual media and the creative industries. I'm Paula Blair and I'm really excited to introduce you to my guest, Dave Lewis, who makes the Cinemillennials podcast, which you should absolutely check out. Dave's website, where you can find his film reviews and podcasts and YouTube links, is in the show notes wherever you're accessing this episode. Please do go and check that out. Dave is doing really great work to promote cine and media literacy, so please go and give him all the support you can. Dave has also been kind enough to have me guest on Cinemillennials, so please do subscribe wherever you access your podcast so you don't miss what for me was a richly enjoyable conversation about It Happened One Night, the Frank Capra film from 1934. A massive thank you as well to our patrons over at patreon.com/avcultures and all our wonderful listeners for keeping us going. There will be more information and ways to support Audiovisual Cultures at the end. For now, settle in for this really joyous movie conversation with Dave. Dave Lewis, host of Cinemillennials podcast. You're very welcome to Audiovisual Cultures.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this. I really enjoyed being on your podcast, representing the older millennial contingent. And we'll explain your podcast in a minute. I think just generally, it's all right if I ask you, how are you doing and whereabouts are we talking to you from and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm from New Jersey, Union County, New Jersey, closer to New York, around a 40-minute train ride away from the Big Apple.
Great. So Dave, you do a lot of film reviews and you have what comes across to me as a particular interest in classical era Hollywood, if that's fair to say. I was wondering if you'd be happy to just introduce yourself and tell us about your interests and why you're so drawn to the types of films that you're drawn to and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, my name is Dave Lewis. I'm the host of and producer, creator extraordinaire, whatever you want to call it. It's such a weird thing to like have a title for it when you do everything, you know. But yeah, so I am the creator of the Cinemillennials podcast, where myself and another millennial watch a classic film. So that ranges from 1890 to 1969, because that is, you know, the academic quote unquote quota or era of the classic era for filmmaking. I've always just been fascinated with history. Basically, what we do is we watch the movies for the very first time, and then we see how it relates to our society today, our millennial experiences, whether it be culturally, popular culturally, sociopolitically, economically, what have you. We really want to try to understand the people of the past within the lens of our present and future. And I think it's really important that we look at that stuff because of all of the different things that we are going through right now, whether it be racial issues, whether it be economic issues, classicist issues. There are a lot of things that we can learn from the past in order to create a better future. And I've just always been fascinated with history ever since I was a little kid. My mom got me a Fisher-Price castle where you can have a cannonball shootout and a trebuchet and a catapult and have the little clicking kind of drawbridge and the knights and everything. And that really, really made me fascinated with history. And I think film really came into a creation point, like a kind of a amalgamation of those two, and which is why I was inspired to create Cinemillennials. We can learn a lot from our history. We can learn a lot of things through film about history. Yes, there's a lot of inaccuracies within historical filmmaking, but what we really try to do is to look at the humanity of that and really focus on the way of the future. And Cinemillennials was a perfect fit for that, really.
I think it's a really excellent idea for a podcast because it's both that combination of the period that you're looking at, which in a way it's quite a big period of cinema, but in another sense, in terms of sort of literary history, it's so tiny and it's still in this state of becoming itself. So that's really interesting. But then also the generation that you've focused on, because, you know, you're not looking at Gen Zs or Gen Zs, you know, at the same time. It's specifically millennials, and that ranges from the older ones like me from the 80s to the younger people up to the late 1990s and stuff. So that combination, and thinking these older films, that as a film educator, having taught a lot of, you know, younger people coming even after me, the sense is that, oh, those old films are just boring and they're nonsense, you know. So I'm just sort of just to probe a little bit more. What kind of things are you learning from that, from those combination of those two things together?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like the other idea that I had with Cinemillennials was that I was noticing, like watching Marvel movies or whatever is big right now, Star Wars, and then especially right now, Dune. There is a massive, massive influence of older films coming into the films that are coming out today. And there are a lot of people that there's this culture, this subculture on YouTube of covering film and breaking down or saying like Dune explained, the ending explained of things. And I find this really fascinating because people want to know everything. They have this deep, deep hunger to know everything because partly people want to, you know, feel better or more superior than other people. And in that way, I wanted to get that group. But at the same time, I wanted to get the group that people find it boring. They find it exhausting. Oh, it's black and white, so that's not going to be interesting. But there's a lot of things that you can play with within black and white, within shadows. I think the shadow play is like the thing that's the most important thing about that is you're able to unlock something with a restriction of not having color, with a restriction of having to write around things in order to make it more relevant to that person or more relevant to that culture in that time without specifically and explicitly saying those things. Like we talk about in the podcast, but the Hays Code, I think it's so fascinating to see where people come from, where myself and other millennials come from, where they're like saying, I've never watched a classic film before, but I understood that because of the different references behind it. And I understood the simplicity of it because it wasn't so specific. But at the same time, like we talked about in our episode about It Happened One Night, there are references where I myself am not going to understand at all that other people might understand, like the older generations. And I think with the millennial generations wanting to know more, that's where I was like, okay, maybe more and more. And now that there's a big film culture on Twitter and YouTube, people want to know more and more, and they want to see more educated within film. And I thought it was a way for not only myself to learn more about classical filmmaking or filmmakers, the masters of the past, if you will. I thought it was a really cool idea to talk to people about it, to see and almost, I don't want to say enlighten because that sounds a little pretentious, but bring people to say, hey, this stuff is amazing because of how revolutionary it was and how still relevant it is today.
And I think it's a great opportunity to bust some misconceptions, I think, as well, because the more you dig, the more you reveal. And I think we've both talked to a mutual friend of ours, Lars Henriks, about the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And what strikes me about that film is it's a reminder that those early silent films, they're not necessarily black and white because they used a lot of color filters. Right. You know, there's lots of blues and purples and pinks and greens that are used in those. And so they're expressionists in more ways than one. It's not just long shadows and things. They're actually quite vibrant in how they're expressing the internal feelings of characters and so on. It's a really lovely opportunity for you to get someone by your side and for each of you to learn that together. It's quite a joyous thing to listen to for me.
I'm so glad it gets that effect. And it's funny you say that it's joyous because the majority of the people that I've talked to so far within 20 something episodes, everyone's loved their movie. Everyone's loved the vibrancy of it. Everyone's loved the different acting techniques that they had back then, whether it be a silent or it'd be a talkie. It's something that's like so fascinating to see, like once they understand, like, oh, wow, this is art. This is a true form of art and expression. And it's been something that's around for 100 years, not just the last 20 or 30 years or 40 years now. That's more things are coming up within 40 years now, you know, especially the things that we grew up with 40 years plus almost 50 years so now. It's definitely something that has brought me a lot of joy into having a lot of people really dig deep into things that they would have never seen before.
And I enjoy listening to it as well, I think, because I think a lot of the films that you cover are films that I maybe watched as a younger person because I was just curious about cinema. And then I ended up studying it formally. So I watched a lot of the films as well in my film studies courses and my own research and teaching. it reminds somebody like me to watch those films for the joy of them, as well as for what you can learn from them. So I enjoy it on those two levels.
That's exactly what I was going for. So thank you so much for those kind words.
I was wondering, how do you choose your person that you do it with? Because I know that you have some people come back and do them repeatedly. I suppose with all of us who started out with an indie podcast, you start with who you know, you start with your friends and that kind of stuff, and people you bump into on the internet like me. But who are you looking for? Who's your ideal guest, do you think?
My ideal guest would be someone, I don't know. I think I like talking with family and friends because I think it's so interesting to see where their perspectives start from and end with. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if I can get somebody, whether it be like academics like yourself, or maybe somebody that's been involved with filmmaking, or like an actor or an actress would be really cool to have if they're like doing a period piece and they want to go back, or maybe something like along the lines of, I think it would have been great to have somebody that was a part of Mank talk about Citizen Kane. I think that would have been awesome to see, because I feel like, especially with Citizen Kane is something that everyone knows about, Rosebud, whether people know it or not. And especially with Mank and how it was about the creation of the story. There's so many like different versions of the creation of the story, whether it's Pauline Kael's essay, which now has been proved false, which is the whole movie. That's what the whole movie is based off. But no, it's interesting to see like how people really interact with film and how they go from saying, oh yeah, just a movie, to wow, it's saying a lot about society, and especially how it's so relevant to our world today. But yeah, I think somebody that would be a part of something, whether it be like movies like Mank or The Other Side of the Wind. I don't know why I'm referencing Orson Welles here twice. He's been on my brain a lot for some reason. But no, I think somebody like that would be really, really cool to have.
Well, never say never, hopefully someday. Yeah, that would be really great to do that. I'm thinking as well about you saying references. This was something I used to tell my students, as somebody who is, say, teaching usually first year film studies students a lot. I noticed that, every year they would just get a bit more reticent to just be there at university. And there's a lot of factors involved in that. In the UK, I can't speak for the US, but, there's reasons behind that in the UK at the moment, around fee structures and that sort of stuff. And I used to tell my students, it's not even just doing well academically. You'll actually start to understand references in shows like Family Guy a lot more if you pay attention to what I'm telling you, and you'll enjoy it more because you'll get it and you'll go, oh, that's from that movie. I understand this now on a different level. And that was something that came up in our episode that's coming up as well, is those influences, as you say, of films that are coming out today. You will understand them more because those directors, they are from the school of going to the cinema. They are cinephiles. They know what they're doing and they love what they're doing. So you'll understand them more if you just watch widely.
Right. And I feel like that's where a lot of, especially the big directors today now, like some of my favorite directors are Denis Villeneuve and Christopher Nolan. And basically they often, I say this a lot about Christopher Nolan, he basically takes a lot from Hitchcock with the tension that he builds within the film, whether it be Dunkirk, where you have the constant ticking of the mechanical movement of a watch. I love that effect because I'm a big watch guy as well, big horology guy as well. But it really builds that tension. And then with Denis Villeneuve, he uses a lot of the stuff from science fiction of the past, but is able to fully realize a world. I've been obsessed with Dune for the last couple of years, building up, because I've read the first two books. The third one I'm really, really struggling to get through. But I think what he was able to do was he was able to build the world a la, George Lucas. And like he's able to build the world, even though George Lucas is, people differ on if that's a classic or not, because that's the whole like kind of idea is people say, oh, a classic is just a thing that like, everybody reveres rather than the academic sense, which is the way that, I go by. But the way that he's able to build and build and build kind of tension. And he kind of reminds me of older film directors, not even before. Well, you can also say Hitchcock as well, because of his stuff from the silent era. A lot of people don't know that Hitchcock did silence as well. And he even did an adaptation of Plow in the Stars, which is really random to me as someone that worked in Irish studies. And I was really interested in seeing that. But anyway, I think basically what we see a lot with those two directors and other directors, like Quentin Tarantino is probably a great example, even though I'm not a fan, is that they're using the techniques and they're using the ideas of the past and they're influenced by the past. And they want to elevate their stuff by using the old masters. And by using the old masters, they elevate their own projects as well.
Definitely. It's quite great to be able to show people that, or at least introduce it to them, and for them to get it and run with it by themselves. You know, that's quite a great thing to pass on to people. Would you like to receive updates, links and special offers straight to your inbox? Then visit audiovisualcultures.wordpress.com to sign up to our mailing list. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how do you choose the films? You've mentioned a few limitations already. You've got that time period. So we're looking at quite, as you mentioned, classicism in the sense of periodization. So looking at a time period of film. And you're looking, for the moment, as far as I know, specifically Hollywood era, which is a bit grey in the very early years. But a lot of the films that would go right back to the 1890s are probably going to be really difficult to access anyway. So, I mean, you need that limitation. I think you need a limitation. But I was just wondering about your experience of working within that. And it just got me thinking again about, there is a distinction, I think, an important distinction between Hollywood and US or American cinema. They're very different things, actually. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that and what impact that has maybe on shaping your podcast, or is it something you might address at some point? You know, just what do you think about that?
Yeah, I've thought about it to a certain degree, because I know, you know, in the early 1890s, obviously it was dominated by Edison, which is my area of where I live. It is dominated by Edison and a couple other early ones, until Edison actually forced people out to go to Hollywood by literal gunpoint, actually. Not him himself, of course. Why would he do that? He has a bunch of cronies that did it. Edison was not the great person that everybody thinks he is generally. There is an absolute distinction between American Hollywood films, and it is very difficult because 90% or up to 90% and above of silent films are completely lost. So often it is very hard. So when I picked the films, originally I just picked, I think it was 100 or something films of what are deemed to be the best of the best classics or the most well-known classics, as well as some things that I knew personally from things that I wanted to find out from, whether it be European filmmaking, whether it be the Georges Méliès or 8½. Who does 8½ again? I can't even remember. Oh my gosh. The Italian director.
Fellini, Federico Fellini.
Yeah, Fellini. Thank you. Fellini, and then some of the French directors as well that I really just never really got into because I understood that some of their stuff is kind of a little difficult to get into if you don't understand the whole culture. And, you know, being American, I don't think I'm a regular ignorant American in a lot of ways, but some ways I am. I think that what I was trying to do is let's look at like all the things that are deemed to be as the classics, where I looked at the AFI lists, the BFI lists, wanting to have a good diversification as well as introduce other not so well-known classics. Like on the list, I have The Response by Oscar Micheaux, who is a African-American director, who is one of the first African-American directors. I can't remember the title of the film. I think it's The Unconquerable or something like that. Where he responds to D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, where a lot of people think that this is like, you know, D.W. Griffith is the great, you know, introduction of epic cinema, when in actuality, there were people in Italy and France doing a lot more than he was way before D.W. Griffith even came to the stage, and that were doing way less problematic stuff. And I wanted to introduce Oscar Micheaux. I wanted to introduce other people that might not be able to be on the pedestal of what Hollywood and other people think as like the great filmmakers. And I want people to look into European filmmaking because there's a lot of great stuff, as well as I'm trying to now look at other films outside of Europe, outside of Hollywood, outside of America, in order to have a big diversification when I do have people that are from other places that want to talk about their personal and cultural experiences going to the cinema. So mainly we have films that are known as the benchmark for a lot of stuff. So whether it be Citizen Kane, like we talked about, for me, you know, Frank Capra's kind of lexicon of our filmography of Americana, or like we talked about Capricorn with It's a Wonderful Life, which is one of my favorite films of all time. And then you have the great British directors like this guy behind me, David Lean, Lawrence of Arabia, which is another great favorite film of mine. It's all across the board. I wanted to understand what is the best things, or what a lot of people like scholars like yourself or, you know, academics say this is the best, as well as the same thing as what a lot of people say is the best, like people that are outside of the filmmaking world. So I wanted to understand, and I wanted to like educate myself as well as help other people educate themselves through listening to it and participating. And going back to the idea of American film versus Hollywood, there's a lot of, you know, DIY and quote unquote punk type of influences, or there's a lot of DIY and punk type of directors that are doing stuff that not many people know about. So I'm trying to delve deeper into those in order to see like if I can add anything on. And then of course, you added It Happened One Night. So I'm always open to suggestions, whether it be, you know, anything in the world. It doesn't matter whether it be like, you know, a small thing or something that's obvious. Like, why didn't I think of that? What am I doing? Why didn't I just think of that movie? So it's a whole thing across the board.
It gets me thinking a lot about curating your own film viewing in a way. That's been on my mind a bit anyway, because again, our mutual friends, Lars, Nissan and Yaren on over at Mysterium Pictorum, you know, where they've found a disc, you know, they find a hard drive with these 300 films on them. And so that's what their podcast is about, is it's curated for them, is their film viewing and what you've done and the limitations that you've set. And it's something that for me in this show, I know that my show it doesn't have that niche. You know, I'm quite broad and sprawling because those are my research interests, or where are things slipping over each other. I just feel like there's really good grounds here for a really fascinating research project where it's, right, I want to make a podcast about this thing. And so I'm curating this group of films that I'm going to watch to talk them through. You know, I just, there's something really fascinating about that that's just brewing away. Yeah, and we're both participating in that and other people's in a way as well, which is quite nice.
Yeah, it's funny that you say it's like kind of like a research project, which I think that's a perfect example of what it is, because I went to school for history. I'm trained, I don't want to say historian because, you know, that's not my field. And I don't want to sound too pretentious either. I'm not going to call myself, I'm a film historian. But, you know, I did study.
In a way you are. Don't play it off.
All right. I'll say it. I'm a film historian in a way. But no, I studied history and went to school for history because, as I said before, it was a lifelong passion. And I really do think that film is a good way of introducing, not exactly educating, because obviously, you know, there's too much Hollywood stuff like The Last Duel, which is oh my God, the armor in that. But no, which is actually funny, like to go on a little tangent. Armor, medieval representations of armor are better in the first half of cinema rather than what is going on today, unfortunately. But I think it's a great way to really see what people are into and see what they're not into, and then see how they can relate it back to our world today and how to understand what we're doing wrong or what we did do wrong in the past, whether it be through art or social movements, and how we can fix that today. And I think through filmmaking, that introduces a lot of topics that can be often difficult and can really but can really make them feel comfortable enough to talk about those issues.
I think just on that, I was wondering if you have some examples of episodes that come particularly to mind for you from Cinemillennials where that sort of thing has really happened and you and your guests have really dug out something, you've unearthed something like that, and it has really shown you, oh gosh, that's so relatable to the recession we've just seen 10 years ago or something like that. Like, do you have some examples that you could point some listeners towards?
Yeah, one of the main examples that I thought of was All About Eve and how it's apparently queer coded. There's a lot of references to queer coding within that I myself did not know any of that from that world. I heard a little here and there, but my cousin Kelly, who is, she's very interested in that kind of period. And then not that kind of period, within those issues, and within those issues within the period, and how there's a lot of different references to queer ideas and representation within that film. And I had no idea about that because I always heard all about Eve being this, like, on Twitter, there's a big old Hollywood community. Mm-hmm. And with it being so kind of like, I'm looking at the DVD box right now, with how impactful it is within that community. And I was like, okay, well, I can see it as this way. And then somebody sees it as another way, really fascinates me because, I myself, I'm a straight cishet person. I don't understand everything that's going on within that community. I try to and educate myself more and more, which is why one of the reasons why I picked All About Eve, because I wanted to know about that, and why Kelly picked All About Eve, because of its representation in a time where that representation could not exist in a lot of places. Mm-hmm. And now when you even look back even further, not to a film that we've covered, on Cinemillennials, but there's films from the 20s and 30s and even earlier that do have representations of queer people, LGBTQ plus people that are coded in a way as to run around the Hays Code and other restrictions set up at the time. So that's another one. Another one on top of that is Some Like It Hot is another great one that we really talked about gender politics and the representation of gender on the screen, and, even transgender issues as well. So that was really fascinating. There's a couple films that we really talk about. I mean, we talked about It Happened One Night with classism and economic strife between the classes, and how we really see what America was at post-depression, or during that depression, not post-depression, during the depression, and how people were trying to travel across country for work. They were having this depressed but jolly positivity at the same time when with the scene that they're on the bus. And then you also have gender politics in that, within how Peter tries to hail the cab. And you have very sexist, but what some people could say as empowering to the female characters in the story is the whole, I'm going to hitch my dress up just to reveal, and then I get the car right away, use my sexuality as a power kind of grab in a way. So yeah, those are a couple examples that I could really think of right now. And especially, how could I forget this one? Citizen Kane as well. I know I keep talking about it, but the ideas of, especially right now, billionaires having all this power, people like Charles Foster Kane having all of this power, and how you can clearly relate to a lot of major political and economic figures today and how they treat the world around them, when in actuality, a lot of it was down to childhood trauma and issues that they weren't, loved enough, or they weren't, that kind of thing, where we really have to look at everybody from a human perspective, whereas, a lot of people can villainize as well. But we need to look at, like, what happened and why they are the way that they are today. And maybe we can empathize, maybe we shouldn't empathize at all. So there's a lot of different issues there that we can really delve into.
Yeah, totally. The media mogul as well. That just is a beast that won't die, I think.
Nope, definitely not. We need to, there's a lot of issues going around with media moguls and how they control the media, or who controls the media really, and how different points of view and perspectives are pushed out rather than held against an iron door so they don't get pushed out.
We'd love you to be part of the conversation with AV Cultures Pod on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. And we also have Discord. You say you've got a background in history, and you talk quite a bit about that. And then, and I think you probably already answered this question, because you've said your interest in film quite dovetails with that, and it's quite revealing. So, what was it attracted you to doing film reviews and writing film reviews, as well as podcasting film reviews and that sort of work?
It was just something that I've just been always passionate about. Writing really kind of came as an accident. I was working at, I went to an event at the American Irish Historical Society in New York. I'm very involved with the Irish community in New York, especially the New York Gaelic Athletic Association. And I actually pointed out, it was 2016, so it was the year of, the 100th anniversary of the 1916 Easter Rising in Dublin. And I was just there, as a friend to support my friend who was she ran the events at the American Irish Historical Society. I was just pointing out to somebody, a couple that didn't really know about Irish history, because I studied that a lot. My grandfather really got me into it when I was a young kid, talking about the different, people of the past, whether it be Padraig Pearse or Tomas MacDonagh, or, the signatories, or even people a little later, Thomas McSweeney, people like those figures of the past during the Irish Revolutionary period. And then I just pointed out this is a copy of the 1916 Easter Rising Proclamation, like a legit copy of it. And then somebody noticed that, oh, hey, this kid knows what he's talking about. So I started working for a man named Turlough McConnell. He is from Donegal, which is where my family's from in Ireland, and which is not too far from where you're from.
Yeah.
I just found it interesting, and I found that history I was so passionate about it, and I started working within that field. And he had connections within Irish America magazine, so I started working there as an editor and writer, assistant editor and writer, covering all across the board of history, Gaelic athletic associations, events. I covered events. I made a podcast for them where I wanted to make this deep dive into history and how it is still relevant within the Irish American kind of culture today, which unfortunately is a lot of older people rather than younger people being passionate about it. Because a lot of younger people, it's just St. Patrick's Day. You get drunk, you go crazy for a day, and that's about it. Not really knowing where their family's from or the history of it. People inappropriately saying things about the IRA and things like that, which, it's too much of an issue, ignorance wise on those kind of histories. And I think it's something that I just kind of fell into because it was a passion for me. There was a film critic there called Cahir O'Doherty who really, really pushed me into going into film reviewing. He actually had a lot of connections within the New York kind of film screening circles. So he actually got me an invitation to the Stan and Ollie the Stan and Ollie screenning. And ever since I was a kid, I watched March of the Wooden Soldiers or Babes in Toyland. And that had such a massive impact on my life. Every single year I get a nutcracker because of that movie. My parents give me a nutcracker because I thought the soldiers in the movie were real. The whole story is that, for those that don't know, Stan and Ollie, Laurel and Hardy play toy makers in Santa's workshop. They were asked to create 600 soldiers at a foot high. Instead, they made 100 soldiers at 6 foot high. And they defend the land of Toyland from the boogeyman. And I thought they were real. So I was like, can you please get me them? Can you please get me them? Long story short, my parent, Santa Claus got me a nutcracker that's probably about this tall, about 3 or 4 feet. And ever since then, I've been obsessed and watch it every year. So there you go. Early Hollywood influenced me at a young age. But yeah, so from there, I started doing my own things on YouTube. They are not very good. There's one that is okay, decently. I probably need to re-edit it. It's about how Lawrence of Arabia really sets up people's intrigue with showing his death at the beginning of the movie. And then later on, you're going to see the whole arc of his life within the military and his experiences in the desert. And you see all the different perspectives of all the people that worked with him throughout the film. And that really builds the intrigue. That started with Blade Runner 2049 and, things from there. And it's just been growing. I have like 317 subscribers as of right now. Never did I think that I was going to get that far. But yeah, it's something that I just have always enjoyed. I think the first film that I probably saw in theaters was Toy Story. And from there was probably after that, the first live action film I saw in theaters was Star Wars. And I got so excited that apparently I was screaming and crying and going nuts in the theater, thinking it was the coolest thing in the world, that I almost got my aunt and like 4 or 5 of my cousins and my brother kicked out of the theater. So it's always been there. And it just was this kind of steady build into something that I've always been passionate about history. As I said, I always wanted to know the why and the how about a lot of people and who they were. And then that, I just go into deep dives on Wikipedias and then go into the kind of academic resources and things like that. So it's something that just has been a slow build over my whole life. I mean, I remember watching, the Oscars when the Lord of the Rings trilogy came out. That was something that really, really changed my whole world about filmmaking and thinking about film and watching the behind the scenes of those movies. It was something that just, developed a lifelong passion for film and wanting to know the why, the how, and the who behind the scenes.
I really can appreciate that curiosity. I have a very similar curiosity as well, which is why I ended up studying film quite formally. those are all things that I've really always encouraged film students to do as well. So it really heartens me that someone out there does it. Because it can be quite difficult to get actual students of the subject to be that curious and to look those things up. I've always said that even just credit sequences are gold mines of information.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, like not to interrupt you, it was like I look at those a lot. I'm like, wait, that person did this. One of my favorite like film facts is that some of the greatest films of all time were written by like the same 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
Like I think it's Robert Bolt did Lawrence of Arabia. He was a part of It's a Wonderful Life. He was a part of so many other great films that he did. I know I only named 2, but when you look up Robert Bolt and see what the credits he did, it's amazing. But no one knows his name because of, you know, the House Un-American Activities kind of idea event that happened, and how a lot of communists and leftists were completely shunned from Hollywood, including him. I mean, you had another great example is Dalton Trumbo and how he did Spartacus and all these other great films. But you have to find the little details within those stories. And that's how you find it, through the credits, through the different matte paintings in the background of Star Wars, or the special effects artists within Lord of the Rings, Andy Serkis, you know, how these things all connect. One of the great examples of old Hollywood is Conrad Veidt. People don't talk about him enough. He's one of the greatest actors, film actors of all time. Look at his filmography: The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, The Man Who Laughs. His face is still making an influence on our popular culture today. Nearly almost, I think he's almost, you know, it would have been close to his 100th birthday or something like that by now. He also did Casablanca. He is so super influential within our society and popular culture today, and what is known as the, you know, upper echelon of filmmaking and storytelling. And I think that's really fascinating how there's still so many names that have not been talked about enough within filmmaking. And, you know, in a way, I hope to bring those people a little bit more to light, even though we are talking about those bigger kind of people for the majority of the time.
It's great. I think anything that can redress the erasures that have happened, because there were a lot more women involved in filmmaking than people realize. In the early years, most film editors were women. A lot of screenwriters were women, but their names were changed or masculinized, or they just weren't included in the credits. You know, so always look at what's missing as well as what's there, I think.
Right. And you talk about women. I mean, some of the earliest, like we wouldn't have the color version of Le Voyage de la Lune, A Trip to the Moon. We wouldn't have that because it was all women hand painting every single frame of that film. That's why it's still colorized today. And then you also have, you know, for more updated reference, you know, talking about Lawrence of Arabia, Anne V. Coates, who worked until, what was it, a couple of years ago before she unfortunately passed. She was working on so much influential films. I mean, she's the one that basically created the famous cut, one of the most famous transitions of all time with Lawrence of Arabia, where he has the match and he blows it out and you just see the beautiful sunrise across this vast desert wasteland. There were so many, especially, I mean, when you look at even earlier in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, a lot of famous directors, especially comedy directors, were female. And it's really, really fascinating to see how people want to have that focus today. There's another Northern Irish, oh my God, I can't remember his name, film kind of historian director that did a whole series about women in film. And I think it's on Criterion.
Oh, Mark Cousins.
Yeah, Mark Cousins. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Mark Cousins' great series on that. I started watching that a couple months ago, and I was like, oh my God, there's just so much good history here, and there's so much good kind of representation here, and more people should know about it.
Good to hear. Joe, I feel like we should chat again, because I'd love to hear more about your experience as an Irish American person. This is something that's come up in the podcast a few times, you know, where I've had a guest on, and it turns out they have a wealth of Irish history. So Shay Donovan, but also Gary Rhodes, who is a film historian, and he's from the US, and he lived in Belfast for a long time, and he taught me film studies. Actually, he was one of my lectures at Queen's.
Oh, that's cool.
And he's just written masses and masses and masses of books. He spits them out. He's the machine, this man. but he's written loads about early horror and early American horror. He's a huge fan of Bela Lugosi, and he's written big histories of Lugosi, but he's also written quite a lot about Irish American cinema. So he might be somebody you'd be interested in looking into.
Oh yeah.
He's one of those people, he's a big mixture, you know, like he's got Cherokee in him, but he's also got Irish in him, and you know, he's a really big mixture in one person. So Gary's pretty fascinating. But yeah, I'd love to really keep in touch and dig into that a bit more.
Yeah, of course.
The diaspora is so interesting. I mean, I'm technically a diaspora in a way now as well, living in England. And it's also really cool for me to hear that you're from Ulster specifically.
Yeah, my family's from Dunlow in Donegal. So one of the way, you know, isolated places. And it's actually my great grandparents that come from Ireland. And my grandfather was just always super passionate about it, telling me about it. And then, you know, I went to Donegal in 2013 2013. I absolutely, you know, loved the place, wanted to learn Irish. I know a little bit of Irish myself, just always was fascinated in history. And then, you know, to see the sports and how intertwined it was within the culture. And, you know, being someone that's been, you know, part of the GAA community for the last, I don't know, almost 9-10 years, which is insane to think about. It's really interesting to see, especially within, you know, the context of America, and to see how there's almost this kind of like secret world within America, within Ireland, and people that have absolutely no connection to Ireland or any Celtic or Gaelic type of representation really fascinates me, and how they just cling on to it. We had, I live in a pretty urban area, and we had a lot of, you know, African Americans, we had Hispanic Americans, we had a lot of kids, because I started a hurling club at my university, and we had a lot of, like, we had probably the most diverse team.
Wow.
And it was so fascinating to see like how these people are just so attracted to Irish culture without even, you know, noting that they're a part of a whole lineage of, you know, what is it, 4,000 years history within politics, societal issues and things like that, that are baked in within that culture, that are baked in within their sports as well. So it's really, really fascinating to see the Irish American experience over here, and how to see it within the lens of the GAA, but also within the lens of, as growing up, I like really was interested in my history kind of perspective. I'm Irish, Scottish, and Welsh. So, you know, I was very interested in those peoples and the relation to British history and medieval history as well. So it was something that just like was something that's, you know, I was so passionate about, and I just wanted to delve deeper. I've talked at the Irish consulate, things like that. So like I did that kind of stuff, and I wanted to like branch out into more things like in film, because it was something that I was always super passionate about, and something that I just loved and wanted to like learn more about and educate myself. And, you know, I was already doing the reviews. So I was doing stuff all along, and I just wanted to know more and help other people know more, because, you know, as a kid, you're somebody that, and I'm sure you were the same thing, you watched older films. How many times did you get made fun of for watching older films? And now, and like, I mean, you talked about the next generation, how you're talking about that. And like, I know, I think I saw somewhere on one of your social medias where you had Farscape in the background and things like that. So, you know how it felt when people like kind of like put you down on stuff. And, you know, whether it be, for me, it was like a lot of my Irish stuff, as well as, because, you know, I lived in a town that was mostly Italian Americans or Portuguese Americans and things like that. And they were very fiercely and very rightly proud of their heritage. Well, you know, that could be also a whole conversation, but about different ideas about nationalism and things like that, or cultural nationalism or whatever. But growing up, liking 20 years ago, Lord of the Rings, and then fast forward to 15 to 18 years later, where everyone's obsessed with Game of Thrones. It's like, come on, guys, you gotta catch up on the cool stuff here. But you know, it's something that I wanted to help other people to realize. This is something that has clearly, you know, made a dent and impact within our current generation of filmmakers and actors. Why was that a thing? Why are these references coming up now? And how are these, and where did these references come from? So I want to educate people. I want to have people know more about film, and I want to have conversations with people that would have never looked at this thing before, and really say to them, like, this is something good. You're missing out on it. Let's get into it and see how it relates to us, so it can be more relevant to you.
Brilliant. So just before I leave you, and so that I don't forget to say it to you, if you ever get to go back to Ireland and you ever get to travel more around Ulster, if you check out the Ulster American Folk Park, you will love it.
I've heard a lot about it working with Irish America. I think they actually have like a kind of a deal with them. I've never been to Northern Ireland. I've never been there. I'm sorry, I'm saying the North because all my friends say it. I'm like, I got to stop doing that. I have to get out of the whole kind of, thing. Cause a lot of them are obviously, directly tied to a lot of different movements.
Yeah.
I definitely need to go. I have friends in Derry as well. So I definitely need to like take a trip up there anyway. I mean, I'm going right through there anyway from Dublin to go to Donegal. So I definitely need to check out a lot more stuff. And it's something that, I need to delve into more of, definitely, because I do love the medieval parts. I love the 1920s. I'm hesitant into dealing with like more of the 60s through, the 90s stuff, because it is often very hard and it's very, very difficult. There are a couple films, that I'm like I put off watching Hunger for a long time. And I was like,
it's tough.
I don't know. That's very intense, especially with somebody that has that kind of connections and has those personal, some people that I know within family have those personal like kind of stories. So it's something that's very fascinating to me as someone that is removed from that history because our family came over here in the 1920s. So yeah, I just definitely want to learn more and like educate myself. And again, watching films, like I saw the Maze film, what was it? Yeah, The Maze, I think it was called, with oh my God, I can't remember the main actor's name, but I saw that premiere, the American premiere there, and it was just really interesting to see how H Block was run and how all that stuff was like really fascinating. So, and that's why like I found your work so fascinating, because I want to see how those experiences are expressed through filmmaking, because, I have books and I have things that are, some of them are biased, some of them are not, because they are historical books and, they try to be unbiased as much as they can. I want to look at multiple perspectives rather than one perspective that I'm clearly being around constantly with the GIA and other places as well. So it's really fascinating to see all the perspectives and to see where people came from and why people are doing things, especially now and this is going to be a talking point within the next couple weeks or months with Kenneth Branagh's Belfast film. I don't know. I'm like very hesitant on that film. I think it's amazing that Kenneth Branagh is going back to his roots of being from Belfast in Northern Ireland. I think that's really fascinating because I had no idea that he was. I was like, what? Exactly. I was like, are you kidding? Like this guy is supposed to be like the English of the English because of his connections to Shakespeare, when he's really not. Like I think there was a BBC kind of thing that he did very early on. I was like,
the Billy plays.
What? Yeah, exactly. Yep. The plays. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, wow, this is so strange.
Well, he's been a patron of the Lyric Theatre in Belfast for many, many years. He's never really gone away. He has kept a hand in, and he does keep going back. He's never really been behind the door. I think it was when he was a teenager or something, or when he went to England for university. You get the crap kicked out of you for having this accent, especially when the conflict was on. So he changed it pretty quickly, but that's what happened a lot back then. Yeah. I had almost forgotten about that film. Yes, I'm quite looking forward to that coming out. I know exactly what you mean, because it's painful and yet it's joyous too. It's a very ambivalent feeling I have, and especially spending so many years studying that type of film. My PhD studies were, they were the love of my life, and yet they nearly killed me. It was very extreme. And you're absolutely, it's really refreshing to hear you talking about those multiplicities, because it's very much about plural histories. They're very, very slippery. But you know what? If you ever want to watch any of those kinds of films and you want to do something like this where we record a chat about them, you'd be so welcome. That would be wonderful. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so you'd be very welcome back. So before I forget this as well, tell our dear listeners where they can find more about you, where they can listen to Sunday Millennials, plug all your stuff.
Yeah, my website is dlewmoviereview.com. I know it's a lot. DLEW moviereview.com. You can find all the podcasts I've done, whether it be Irish America, Cinemillennials, my YouTube channel. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would be more than glad if anyone subscribed, even if it's just one person. I'm just trying to get my voice out there, trying to get, the ideas that I think are very important to the world and more people should listen to, put across in those videos. And I think it's just something that I want to have a bigger community of people that I can really delve into about filmmaking, about film's relationship with history and history's relationship with film. You can find Cinemillennials on pretty much every podcast provider, every podcast kind of platform, whether it be Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Anchor. You can find it pretty much anywhere. I would be so glad to see people, really talking about more and more classic films. And I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much. I love this conversation.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Always enjoy chatting to you, Dave. And I hope that this is the second of many, many, many chats that we have, because I enjoy your company.
Oh, I enjoy your company too. Thank you so much. It's so nice of you to say that.